Are there any studies out there that have shown that stories are easier to understand than just the data and statistics?
That's the ironic part. So there's lots of data that tells us that stories are effective. So pause for a moment there, right? The data is telling us not to use data. So irony aside, yeah, there's tons of data on that. One thing that I talk about often when I do workshops, because that's one of the most astounding numbers. A psychologist at Yale named Jerome Bruner did a study that showed that stories were 22 times more likely to be memorable than facts alone. So 22 times. That's 2,200%. And in fact, there's lots more data. A gentleman named Kendall Haven did a sort of a meta-analysis of stories, and without boring you, there's hundreds and hundreds of studies that show that in every culture, at any age, whether it's business, school, leadership, community, stories simply work better. It's how we're wired. And to illustrate that, we're in there's a campaign coming up, I think, this year, presidential, and without getting into politics, I would just ask you to think about this. Think of one of your most strongly held beliefs, just a really visceral, emotional, strongly held belief. So actually think about that for a second. And let me ask you a question. Is there any data or study that I could show you that would change your mind?
It'd have to be pretty strong evidence.
Right.
I'd agree.
Yeah, and so I think that's the challenge. When we show data, purely when we show data, we actually put up people's defenses. And so there's even data that shows that, and if you're married, you may know this, trying to convince someone of, with data and persuade them, it doesn't work. In fact, they often move farther along the spectrum, away from the middle, because those natural defense mechanisms go up. Whereas when people are in story mode, and it actually is a different mode, different areas of the brain are working. When people are in story mode, they're much more receptive. And so that's to go back to the example where I was sort of using stories to sell. The funny part was, by using data, purely data, I was actually making my customers and partners and folks I spoke with more skeptical. I was saying, get into skeptical mode, get into a very hypercritical mode, as opposed to using a story with the same data, but woven in. Stories just people, open up. There's actually a word for it. It's called narrative transport, and it literally means that when you think of a story, you're transported to the other place, the same way that you feel when you get lost in a book or movie. And so a lot of scientists are studying this. So again, to bring this back to the sort of practical reasons, I think this is stuff that nobody can afford to miss out on. Stories are too important to leave to chance.
So let's take it